You know this. She is the one that I can't feel at ease about. Marriage is something that lasts a lifetime. Qian went to the main hall to invite Gu Huijing and heard Madame Su chatting with him about something. Hearing the tone, it was something about Su Yunyin's marriage. Gu Huijing replied in agreement. Eldest sister's reminder is correct. If you didn't remind me, I would have neglected it again. Seeing Qian enter the room, Gu Huijing stood up and said, the guests have waited for a long time. Let's go out first. Because there were so many guests this time, the male and female guests were separated into two sides, and a curtain was placed in the middle as a token divider. The area at the front was open and had a large stage built there. Yu Fu looked carefully and found that it was the same troupe as before. It must have been fourth brother who invited them. Yu Fu sat next to Madame Su. This set of seats was the one closest to the middle. In this set, aside from Su Yunyin, there was also the noble Princess Danyang. She sat next to Madame Su with a cheerful smile. This troupe is very good. During the Dragon Boat Festival, they also came to perform at the manor. There's a performer called Yu Guan. Ani will see later. You will definitely like him. After repeated requests by Madame Su, Yu Fu finally started calling her auntie like Gu Shubai and the others. What sort of person is able to receive such praise from you? That Yu Guan. What play will he perform? What character does he play? Su Yunyin sat on Madame Su's other side, and the two began chatting around Madame Su. What a pleasure this was. The two sisters were together every day, yet there was always more to talk about. Madame Su helplessly shook her head. She looked like she wanted to rebuke them, but her eyes were filled with a doting love. Princess Danyang, pick a play that you would like to see, and they will perform it. The two younger ones were too preoccupied. Thus Madame Su had to take care of dealing with the guest. Princess Danyang did not know Yu Guan and was unable to get along with the other two. She was feeling a little awkward, but her complexion recovered upon hearing Madame Su speak to her. This was the elder sister whom Gu Huijing respected, thus she naturally needed to show her respect. Many thanks, Madame Su. You are the elder. You should choose a play first. She remained dignified and raised her hand. The servant taking care of her to the side understandingly brought up the list of plays and was about to hand it to Madame Su when it was suddenly snatched away. Which one is it? You should be able to remember it if you look through the list of plays, right? So it was Su Yunyin who wanted to ask about who Yu Guan was. Yu Fu was unable to remember, thus she took the list of plays and handed it to Yu Fu. Princess Danyang's expression instantly turned ugly. Madame Su glanced at her, then pretended to have not seen anything. If she was a magnanimous type, Madame Su might have had Su Yunyin apologize to her. After all, she was the one who had spoiled Su Yunyin rotten, which made her crude and impulsive. But she, Princess Danyang, did not seem to be a great person. She had an act on the surface and another internally. She pretended to be proper and dignified. This was the sort of girl that she disdained the most. Yu Fu read through them line by line and quickly pointed at one in the list. Ah, I've remembered. It's the role of Du Shenyang. The Du Shenyang of the play Peony Pavilion was a beauty full of tenderness with a kind soul. There were nearly no girls who did not like her. Su Yunyin happily clapped. This could not be any better. They must be both beautiful and a good person to play her. Princess Danyang was bored from just sitting there, and her eyes looked past the thin curtains toward the male guests, quickly meeting with another gaze. Gu Shubai was also looking over at her. She rejoiced, and a bit of a smile crept onto her face when she suddenly noticed something. Today, he was wearing a pale purple, and purple carried a meaning of a good omen coming from the east. Wearing it for a birthday celebration was a joyous thing. Yet Yu Fu also happened to be wearing purple today. Could it be that what the second prince had said was true, and Gu Shubai really did have feelings for Yu Fu? Just look at how Yu Fu was dressed today. At such a young age, she was dressed so carefully to draw people's attention. Just what wicked intentions did she have? Irritation was building up inside her when she suddenly noticed a few young performers playing around near the stage. There were also guests giving them plates of fruit to eat. She suddenly came up with an idea. Madame Su, look, there are young performers over there. Looking so suddenly, I thought that it was Sister Yu Fu. All three looked over in the direction that she spoke of, and there were indeed some young performers. The makeup on their faces was very vibrant, but there was not the slightest resemblance to Yu Fu. Actors and singers were the same in Eastern Ling. They were lowly existences that could not be placed in the spotlight. She was comparing Yu Fu to a performer? Madame Su furrowed her brow, but before she could speak, Su Yunyan had already said, "They don't look alike at all." "How are they not? Aren't they both really short?" Princess Danyang smiled with a deeper meaning, thinking to herself that this related young miss had best not get any weird ideas, giving up the position of young miss of Marquis Gu's manor to some girl with an unclear origin. "Oh, so you were talking about that." Su Yunyan seemed to have understood the look that was in her eyes, dragging out the syllable. "Then Princess Danyang's build is large and fat, just like the walls of the manor. With Princess here, we won't need to worry about catching a cold from the wind." As Su Yunyan said this, she shrank back a little, acting as if to hide behind Princess Danyang. Large and fat? This was the first time that Princess Danyang had ever heard herself described in such a way. For a moment, she was too shocked to speak. She immediately stood up and pointed at Su Yunyan, her hand shaking. "What's wrong?" Gu Shubai had appeared behind her at some point, his eyes looking at Yu Fu. The latter gave him a confused look. It seemed that it was unrelated to Yu Fu. Then he no longer cared. Madame Su would take care of things related to Su Yunyan. He pretended to be passing by and just began to walk off when Su Yunyan suddenly called for him to stop. "Eldest cousin, don't go. Princess Danyang is large and fat. When you were standing behind her, did you feel that the wind was being blocked very well?" Princess Danyang's chest suddenly tightened. It seemed that what the second prince had said was true. He really did like Yu Fu. I was just joking with Sister Yu Fu. Sister Yu Fu and I have known each other for longer than young Miss Su. Could it be that making a joke requires approval from young Miss Su? She was certain that Yu Fu was easy to bully and could not refute what she had said. Thus she looked provocatively at Su Yunyan did not know how to reply for a moment. The one to have been mocked by Princess Danyang was Yu Fu. Her acting out and speaking up for Yu Fu was indeed something that she should not have done. If Yu Fu really went with what Princess Danyang had said, she would be the one to lose a great deal of face. Thinking of this, she uneasily looked at Yu Fu. The latter seemed to be oblivious to the hostility between the two. She just said with a smile, "Princess, Sister Su was also just joking. Don't mind it too much. Let's watch the play." All of her worries were unnecessary. Calling one princess and one Sister Su, Yu Fu's bias could clearly be seen. Su Yunyan let out a laugh and exchanged a glance with her, thinking to herself that with this cute, smiling face, it would be impossible for someone to get mad even if they wanted to. Princess Danyang resentfully sat down. If she continued to stand there, she would stand out a little too much, and others would definitely start to take notice. They would say that she was not sufficiently dignified and magnanimous. More importantly, she could not continue to pursue Su Yunyan's guilt in front of Gu Shubai. Were they not just a young miss related to Marquis Gu's manor and a girl from an unclear origin? Yet they dared to directly oppose a princess? The corner of her lips moved slightly, her smile very apparent. Just wait and see. Sooner or later, they would see. The performance began on the stage, while the spectators down below applauded. The servants of Marquis Gu's manor began to scatter bits of gold and silver onto the stage. The leader of the troupe was smiling radiantly and hastily had a group of young performers quietly go kneel below the stage to give thanks in the direction of Gu Huaijiang. After the liveliness dissipated, the play entered the main plot. A performer in a cerise dress gracefully came out. Their long white sleeves were held in front of their body. Moving the sleeve to cover their face, they wanted to speak, but also held back. With these movements, the melancholy of Du Shenyang's innocent love was on display. Madame Su smiled and applauded. "Yu Fu, is that the Yu Guan that you were speaking of? His figure is great, and his performance is great. It's no wonder you were praising him." Yu Fu opened her mouth and subconsciously wanted to say that it was fourth brother who had the keen insight. However, with Princess Danyang present, she could only swallow her words back down. Princess Danyang seemed to notice her actions and covered her mouth in disdain. Standing up, she said to Madame Su, "I am feeling a little unwell. I will go for a walk before coming back. Madam, please enjoy the play." The three of them got along like family, so what fun was it to sit alone? She would be better served by going for a walk. Who knew? She might even run into Gu Shubai and be able to say a few words in private. Yu Fu watched her walk down the corridor, then suddenly saw a slim and graceful girl in white clothes coming from the other direction. At her side was one of Marquis Gu's Manor's grannies. The bearing of a large family's young miss, Part 2. Madame Gu, young miss, related young miss, this is young Miss Een. Lord Marquis ordered me to bring her here to be seated. The girl before them had a slender build. In her white clothes, she appeared to have a cold temperament. She was beautiful, but also looked a little sorrowful. After the granny introduced her, she stepped forward and bowed to Madame Su. Greetings, Madame Su. My father is Prime Minister Een. He was unable to come today. Thus he had my eldest brother and I come to congratulate Lord Marquis Gu on his birthday. Because I rarely go out, eldest brother brought me to see Lord Marquis first. It was no wonder she arrived so late. It turned out that she had gone to see Gu Huaijiang first. Yu Fu looked at her face and felt that her temperament was a little similar to that of Yin Shuo, but her facial features were not the same. These siblings, they were not born from the same mother, right? Seeing that she spoke kindly and courteously, Madame Su smiled and said, "So it was the young miss of Prime Minister Yin's family. Sure enough, you have extraordinary qualities. Young Miss Een, please sit." Su Yunyan saw that she had a slender build and thought to herself that if Princess Danyang saw this, she might die from the anger. It was fortunate that she happened to just leave. Thinking of this, she could not stop herself from laughing. Yin Jiyao carefully sat down where Princess Danyang had been sitting. Suddenly hearing Su Yunyan's laughter, she looked over in confusion. "Young Miss Een, please don't mind. Sister Su isn't laughing at you. We were telling some jokes just a little earlier." Yu Fu quickly spoke up to resolve the awkward atmosphere, and Su Yunyan hastily nodded her head. Yin Jiyao looked at the two with a smile. It looked as if she was looking at both of them, but her gaze was mostly focused on Yu Fu. Yu Fu noticed this very acutely. This young Miss Een was sizing her up. Yin Jiyao was indeed sizing her up. During the Mid-Autumn Festival's Imperial Banquet, Jiyao had the fortune of seeing young Miss Yu Fu. Your performance was exceptional. At that time, I thought that for young Miss to be so skilled at such a young age, it was truly worthy of admiration. Seeing you today, she covered her mouth. The curve of her smile was very restrained. To say something a little improper, young Miss Yu Fu, it seems like young Miss Yu Fu has grown up a little. You're like a bud that is just about ready to bloom without fear of winter's ice and snow. Su Yunyan quietly clicked her tongue. When this young Miss Een opened her mouth, she spoke in a scholar's tone. She had clearly praised Yu Fu, yet she prefaced it by self-effacingly saying it was improper. In contrast, Princess Danyang was far too uneducated. When she insulted others, there was not the slightest bit of shame. Yu Fu smiled at her and thought to herself that she was merely looking at her clothes. Young Miss Yin's praise is excessive. Everyone says that I have grown taller. But during the Mid-Autumn Festival, I did not see young Miss Een. Seeing you today, you truly have the temperament of a lotus. The one who had just been praised for her beauty returned the praise. The bearing of a large family's young miss was on full display. Yin Jiyao wanted to talk with her some more. I very rarely go out. During the Mid-Autumn Festival's Imperial Banquet, I was seated behind my eldest brother and did not attract any attention. That young Miss Yu Fu did not see me as quite normal, but everyone in the hall definitely saw you. All right, stop going back and forth with the young misses. Since we all know one another, we shall refer to each other as sisters. Going back and forth with calling each other young miss, doesn't it create quite a divide? Su Yunyan spoke up to cut them off. In the past, she had thought that Yu Fu was a girl from the wilderness. It was only now that she found that she herself was like a girl from the wilderness in front of these two. Jinling was a place that did not have many prominent families. Interpersonal relations were relatively simple. They were not as complicated as they were in the capital, where one needed to remain courteous and maintain a smile. Madame Su helplessly and dotingly looked at her. This was the reason that she felt that Su Yunyan could not marry Gu Shubai and become his legal wife. Yin Jiyao and Yu Fu exchanged a smile. Sister Een. Sister Yu Fu. Before the play concluded, In Jian also stood up. Madam Su, please enjoy the show. I will go and take a walk before coming back. Yet another had left for a walk. Princess Danyang had not yet returned from her walk. Yet another one had left. Su Yunyan looked back at the corridor behind them. The wind was so cold and fierce. Who knew what there was to see on these walks? Yu Fu, what do you think they've gone to do? The two quietly whispered to each other behind Madame Su's back. I don't know. It might be that they very rarely come to Marquis Gu's manor and wanted to look around. Suddenly, they heard Gu Huaijiang's voice come from the other side of the curtain. Today is this Marquis' birthday. Many thanks to all for coming in support. Let us drink to this. He lifted his cup, and everyone present followed suit. In Shua and Kuan Wushang were seated with the sons of Marquis Gu's manor. They were treated as if they were honored guests, and the two would occasionally exchange a look. This seventh prince of Western Kuan was allegedly Yu Fu's older junior disciple, and he had watched over her since she was little. Today, he would definitely need to try and get Yu Fu's true identity out of him. This eldest son of the Yin family allegedly held more prestige in court than his father. He was not an average person. He would need to find a chance to chat with Yin Shua. Who knew? Maybe he could make use of Yin Yin to restrain Gu Huaijiang. Madame Su immediately revealed a smile. Su Yunyan furrowed her brow, feeling that there was something off. Master. While everyone was waiting for Gu Huaijiang to announce the joyous event, Qian suddenly walked into the room. Standing next to him, he whispered a few words into his ear. Gu Huaijiang nodded, then walked out with Qian. It seemed that something had happened. He had not provided any explanation, and this caused a great deal of discussion. In Shua watched Gu Huaijiang's parting figure. It was steady and broad-minded. He could not tell what exactly had happened. He really wanted to sneak a look, but with Gu Shubai and the others present, it would not be good to be too obvious. While In Shua could not bring himself to do it, there naturally was someone who could. Lord Marquis Gu's plan for this is too boring. Could it be that he wants this prince to just wait here? This prince will be going to enjoy a bit of a convenient break. When I return, you must tell me what this joyous matter is. After saying this, he brazenly stood up and swaggered out. In Shua furrowed his brow. Was this Kuan Wushang too stupid or too full of confidence? Did he think that Gu Shubai and the others were stupid and could not see what he intended? Sure enough, the people of Western Kuan were barbarians. Using this chance, Su Yunyan quickly grabbed Madame Su. Mother, what sort of joyous thing is Uncle going to announce? You know what it is, right? Quickly tell us. It should not be related to her marriage, right? Why was her intuition telling her that it was definitely related to her marriage? During the previous few days, Madame Su was always praising Gu Winching in front of her, talking about how understanding he was and how gentle he was. She talked about how handsome and talented he was and how he was 1 in 10,000. More importantly, he was not the family's eldest son, thus had not burdens to bear. Nor was he the youngest in the family, and he had not been pampered by his father and brothers. To summarize all of what was said, it was enough praise to elevate Gu Winching to the heavens. She should not have privately met with Gu Huaijiang to talk about her marriage, right? Su Yunyan was exceedingly anxious, twitching, and fidgeting nervously. What are you so anxious about? Mother has always been thinking about your marriage. This is a mother's greatest concern. There's no need for you to worry. Mother understands. Madame Su patted her hand, telling her not to worry. How could she not feel worried? Sure enough, Gu Huaijiang was about to announce her marriage. Mother, why didn't you mention this to me before? Which person did you choose to talk about with Uncle? Yu Fu knew about Su Yunyan's feelings for Gu Yi and immediately understood her worries. She too began to grab Madame Su. Auntie, which brother did you choose for Sister Su? Either way, Head General will be announcing it. Why don't you just tell us now? She sweetly wrapped her arms around Madame Su and made use of all the tricks in the book to act spoiled. Sure enough, Madame Su could not hold out against her. Who else could it be? Do you think that Auntie can't see? Of course, it's Shubai. Shock mixed with restraint. That would describe Yu Fu's tone. Nearly leaping up from the seat and blowing off the roof. That would describe Su Yunyan's tone. The two let out their exclamations at the same time. which gave Madame Su a fright. "Mother, what are you randomly playing at matchmaker for? How can it be eldest cousin? Ha, it's become a complete mess. Gu Shubai liked Yu Fu, and Yu Fu liked Gu Shubai. So why did Madame Su set her eyes on Gu Shubai?" Gu Huaijiang suddenly walked back in. While walking in, he said, "A bit of a small situation occurred, and I've left everyone waiting. The announcement that I mentioned earlier, it's the matter of my son, Shubai, hiss." Su Yunyan inhaled sharply. It was already too late to try and stop it. Yu Fu looked over at Gu Shubai, blankly staring at his purple clothes. Her eyes were slowly becoming dull. Just looking at his figure made her feel down. Gu Huaijiang paused for a moment. "And his marriage to little Yu Fu? What?" At some point, Princess Danyang had returned from her walk. Standing behind them, she stopped in the doorway. A cold wind blew in from the outside, and the girls with weaker bodies shot unhappy glances at Princess Danyang. What was wrong with her? Neither coming in nor going out. She was just standing there while keeping the curtain open. Was she just going to let others suffer from the cold wind? Some people with better eyes noticed her attire and quietly whispered to the girls nearby, "That's Princess Danyang. It's the one who had always been wanting to marry the heir to the Gu family. Now that she's hearing that the heir will be married to someone else, is it not natural that she's lost her wits from the heartbreak?" Throughout the entirety of the capital, there are plenty of people who wanted to marry the heir to the Gu family. Even though she is a princess, she might not necessarily get a chance. I think that young Miss Yu Fu is quite nice. During the Mid-Autumn Festival, she completely suppressed Princess Danyang's showing off. This was just how people were. When facing a great opponent, the feelings of rejection would be even greater. No matter whom Gu Huaijiang had announced Gu Shubai would marry, the daughters of nobles would all be dissatisfied. Yu Fu, however, was different. She was young and did not look like a threat. Bits and pieces of what was being said filled Yu Fu's ears, including Su Yunyan asking Madame Su as to why it was Yu Fu's marriage. Madame Su replied by asking if it was not hers, then whose marriage it could be. Gu Shubai looked over at her. Seeing that she was in a daze, he could not help but smile. She had always been proper in front of outsiders, and this was his first time seeing her in such a daze without concern for appearances. She was a bit like a doll made of snow built in the fields. It was only after a long while had passed that she managed to recover, but her face was bright red from seeing Gu Shubai's smile. While Gu Shubai was smiling happily, Gu Jioga's expression instantly became gloomy, while Gu Yi and Gu Xiang had bitter expressions. If not for being in front of so many outsiders, the two younger ones would definitely have begun crying for Gu Huaijiang to see. Why? Why was it that the youngest, little Yu Fu, was about to become their eldest sister-in-law? Large and aristocratic families are different from smaller families. During this time, they must check horoscopes, preparing of betrothal gifts, checking compatibility, and all sorts of stuff. Wouldn't all of this take 2 to 3 years to prepare? Madame Su counted on her fingers, then suddenly noticed Princess Danyang sitting to the side with a particularly ugly expression. She thought to herself that this was bad. Princess Danyang wanted to marry Gu Shubai, and Emperor Ning had mentioned it multiple times, but had always been refused by Gu Huaijiang. It had continued to such a point that she was still not married when she had become of age. Madame Su's careless remarks earlier had pricked a sensitive part in her heart. It was like someone pointing at her and mocking her for being an older girl who could not get married. This was far more infuriating than being called fat by Su Yunyan. She instantly stood up. This time, she did not even bother with saying anything, and just lifted the curtain then walked out. Now, the guests on the female side had a chance to chat. They did not even bother to hold back their voices, as their mocking tones made it all the way to Yu Fu's table. Su Yunyan also wanted to go and make fun of Princess Danyang with the others, but Yu Fu stopped her by tugging at the hem of her clothes and pulling her back. Making fun of her is like making fun of oneself. Madame Su leisurely picked up her teacup and quietly warned Su Yunyan. If she said not to do it, she would not do it. "Young Miss Yu Fu, Lord Marquis is calling you over." Qian personally came to invite Yu Fu. He finally understood what Madame Su had meant when he previously heard her mention feeling uneasy. Yu Fu followed him over. Gu Huaijiang was seated at the head. He looked at her and gently waved. The 12th month was about to arrive. With the new year, Yu Fu would be turning 13. When she first arrived at Marquis Gu's manor, she had a childish aura. She loved to talk and loved to laugh. But now she had quietly matured a little. She had grown into a budding beauty. She was just like a budding peach blossom, for these were her most innocent years. Yu Fu, I never discussed this marriage with you before deciding it. Are you unhappy with me? When it came to marriages, the matchmaking offices would be invited to make decisions by the parents. The people of Eastern Ling had always done this. Gu Huaijiang knew that she was not from Eastern Ling. The reason that he had acted so rashly was that he was certain of Gu Shubai's feelings. More importantly, he looked down towards the guests. In Shua's gaze was unwavering. He was so young yet so patient. This caused even Gu Huaijiang to feel afraid. There were too many people staring at the pearl in his palm. Rather than allowing Emperor Ning to decide her marriage in the future and choosing an unreliable person, he would rather just choose someone good for Yu Fu. Going by the best men in Eastern Ling, the most outstanding were all in his Marquis Gu's manor. There were none better to choose. This was all thanks to Madame Su for reminding him. She said that she would be returning to Jinling the following month. If she did not settle Yu Fu's matters before leaving, she would not be able to be at ease. Gu Huaijiang knew that he was negligent in many aspects when it came to raising a daughter and could only listen to suggestions with an open mind. Regardless of whether it was as a daughter or a daughter-in-law, he wanted to hear Yu Fu call him father. Thinking of this, his mood improved greatly. Yu Fu looked at Gu Shubai in embarrassment, then lowered her head. The dimples near the corners of her lips betrayed her true feelings. Everyone thought that she would say something along the lines of making the decision for herself. But, eldest brother is really great. I really like him. But, master still doesn't know about this. If he found out that head general decided on a marriage for me behind his back, he will definitely leave Immortals Valley and furiously rush over to the capital. The outer study was in a separate courtyard and had many guards patrolling around it. Below the wall of the courtyard was a row of dwarf evergreens. The branches rustled slightly as a person's head popped up. It was Kuan Wushang. Strange, I clearly followed Gu Huaijiang over. So where is he? Aside from the patrols, nobody else could be found in the surrounding area. He had calculated when the patrols would change and leaped out from behind the trees. With just a few quick moves, he scaled the wall. This was a good chance. Since he had come, he might as well go and visit the outer study. He looked around, then got low to the ground and ran next to the wall toward the inside. With a few quick moves, he arrived at the door of the study. In Shua casually walked around but did not see any sign of Kuan Wushang. He cried out internally. The seventh prince of Western Kuan had a sensitive status. If not Gu Shubai needing to apologize for the fight between them, he might not have been able to enter Marquis Gu's manor. With this rare chance to come in, where would he go? He walked past the stage and suddenly remembered something. While nobody was paying attention, he headed toward the small path surrounded by bamboo. After he left, Gu Shubai came out from behind the stage, his expression calm. Eldest brother, what should we do now? Gu Hanimo held his sword, his eyes looking unkindly in the direction that In Shua had departed in. That was the direction of the manor's outer study. What he saw was a wall of bookshelves. On them were all kinds of books. 2 or 3 shelves had works that were turning yellow, and there were signs that they were flipped through often. Kuan Wushang looked through them one at a time. They were on the topics of military tactics, Western Kuan's records, and Northern Li's records. He's a smart man. Not only does he research our Western Kuan, but he's also researching Northern Li. Northern Li had previously kept from interacting with the 2 southern countries. Even when the war between Western Kuan and Eastern Ling dragged out for many years and burned like a raging fire, Northern Li did not even bother looking into it. He randomly flipped through one of the records on Northern Li. In it were many records that he had not seen even in Western Kuan's records, yet Gu Huaijiang often flipped through them. It was no wonder he could become the undisputed head general of Eastern Ling. Just how many people in the entire world could have all of this information? After a quick glance, His eyes quickly turned to the desk next to the window. Aside from the 4 treasures of the study, there were no unnecessary items. The drawer below contained quite a few official documents. Kuan Wushang looked through all of them one by one, then put them back. They were all common documents. There were neither documents relating to the troops garrisoned at the border, nor were there any related to the military strategies employed by the Gu family. To him, these were of no value. Could it be that Gu Huijiang's study also has some sort of hidden area or concealed compartments? There was such a possibility. He tapped along the wall, and the wall made some dull sounds. These were all solid sounds. He had practically tapped his way around the entirety of the large study, yet he did not notice anything of value. He momentarily became disheartened. Plink. It was the sound of something. It sounded like a pebble hitting a window, and Kuan Wushang instantly became on edge. Had he been found? It was completely silent outside, and not the faintest sound could be heard. If someone had found it, he would have been surrounded long ago. For a moment, he was puzzled. Slowly walking to the back window, he opened it just a crack to look outside. There was nothing there. Outside the window was a partially withered hardy banana. During the winter season, it was unable to bloom, but it would return to its verdant self once spring arrived. Just as he was about to close the window, his body suddenly froze in place. Atop a nearby building, there was a tall and slender figure that was looking straight at him. Seeing that he was about to close the window, that person faintly sneered and tossed another pebble. It struck the window. Plink. It was precisely this sound. Through the window, the eyes of the man on the other building looked accurately at him. He would not be allowed to escape. It was Yin Shua. If Yin Shua was able to find him, it was very likely that the people of Marquis Gu's manor would be able to find him too. He hastily closed the window and stopped paying attention to Yin Shua. He then turned around and walked out through the door. Atop the nearby building, though the window had suddenly been closed, it did not cut off Yin Shua's line of sight, and he paused for a moment. When ordinary people were caught doing something criminal, they would become embarrassed or ashamed. Kuan Wushang, however, did not mind in the slightest. He knew that because he had not exposed him earlier, he would not do it now. His face sure was thick, and his actions sure were decisive. This 7th prince really was a talent. Unfortunately, Western Kuan's eldest prince already had a firm grasp of the position of crown prince. He fiddled with the pebbles in his hand and looked like he was thinking about something. Young Serene, what are you doing here? An old servant had come up with a bamboo broom to do some cleaning. Seeing that there was someone there, he was given a fright. Oh, I saw that the manor was quite lively today and that there were all sorts of things laid out for the banquet. Thus I wanted to find a high place to see just how many people had come. I ended up here unintentionally. This should be an abandoned building. It was filled with random items, and there was a layer of dust on them. So it was like that. The old servant smiled. It's fine. This building is too close to the outer study and has been left unused. It's not a particularly important place, but this place is dirty. If young Serene has finished looking, how about going down to rest for a while? Yin Shua nodded to him and slowly descended. The old servant began sweeping the area where he had just been standing. In the thin layer of dust, he had left behind his footprints. In this place, they were facing in the direction of the outer study. He became pensive but did not stop moving his hands. Suddenly, he felt his broom sweep past something on the floor. Lowering his head to take a look, there were a few pebbles rolling around on the floor. Kuan Wushang returned to the desk, flicked his sleeve, and quickly left. Upon opening the door, the outside was a group of dark figures, and they all had familiar faces. At the front was Gu Huijiang. Behind him were Gu Shubai, Gu Hanemo, Gu Wenqing, and all of the guards of Marquis Gu's manor. They stood outside the study and looked to have been waiting for quite some time. He actually had not heard any signs of movement, yet he had been blocked inside without any room for retreat. His face became a little pale, as he gained some insights into the Gu family's martial teachings. So it seems that the eldest young sir saying that he wanted to apologize to this prince was for this reason. For the sake of this exact moment, to catch him outside this study, to catch him in the act. I apologized to seventh prince with good intentions and out of kindness. Who knew that Western Kuin would use the reason of improving national relations to send seventh prince into the manor to gather military intelligence? I truly am very disappointed in you. Gu Shubai had a look of bitter hatred, and the corners of Kuan Wushang's lips twitched. Capturing him was capturing him, but was there any need for this sort of tone? This sort of disappointed tone? Who knew if he thought of himself as his older brother or something? Gu Huaijiang's tone, however, was far more strict. My Marquis Gu's manor's outer study is an important place. Court documents and military reports from the border come and go from this place, and none are allowed to enter. This Marquis can only treat this as business. Guards present. Arrest him and send him into the palace to be dealt with by His Majesty. Gu Huaijiang had made up his mind. He would not even get close to touching such a muddled affair. This matter would be handed to Emperor Ning to handle. First, it would completely dispel any suspicions of relations between Marquis Gu's manor and Western Kuin. Second, regardless of whether it would offend Western Kuin or curry favor with Western Kuin, all of the responsibility would lie with Emperor Ning. Be gentle. I'm a prince of Western Kuin. Kuan Wushang tried to break free, but his hands and feet were tightly held by some sturdy guards. Thus he began to shout and scream. He clearly was the irreverent person that Yu Fu had described. Marquis Gu, wasn't I just a little curious and wanted to take a look at your study? Are you guys really so petty? I will need to tell Master to not let little senior disciple stay here. While being dragged out, Kuan Wushang struggled and screamed at them. One of the guards detaining him said, "It might be too late. Our Lord Marquis already made the decision to engage young Miss Yu Fu to the eldest young sir." What? This ear-splitting shout could not be heard by those at the study. There was only one. Who knows where the other one is? Gu Shubai stood in the middle of the yard and looked around. His eyes passed by the attic, and he faintly smiled. With Kuan Wushang having been tied up and sent into the palace, Gu Huaijiang and the others returned to the banquet. The atmosphere of the banquet did not seem to have been affected. Instead, this small interlude gave everyone something to talk about. A little-known prince from Western Kuin, only Emperor Ning treated him like a treasure. Nobody else thought much of him. Emperor Ning was particularly welcoming of Western Kuin's special envoy, trying to use this opportunity to improve relations with Western Kuin, such that the two countries would no longer engage in conflicts. These feelings were no longer much of a secret. I already said that Western Kuin suddenly sending out special envoys definitely did not have good intentions. Who knew that they would act kind on the surface, but actually be trying to steal military secrets to defeat the Gu family's army? But of course, Lord Marquis Gu also invited him with good intentions, yet he actually snuck into the study like a criminal. In any case, he is a prince, but he is a disgrace to the educated. Say, how do you think His Majesty will deal with Western Kuin's seventh prince? Based on Eastern Ling's laws, stealing military secrets was a capital crime. Gu Huaijiang dared to tie him up and send him into the palace, but Emperor Ning might not truly dare to punish him, much less execute him. The guests were eager to discuss this topic, guessing at Emperor Ning's reaction when they suddenly heard a commotion come from the outside. Nobody knew what had happened. Shubai, go out and take a look. Gu Shubai had been planning to go and find Yu Fu. Hearing this, he had no choice but to take some people and go out to investigate. A few people wearing fur coats were making a commotion at the entrance to the manor. From time to time, they would speak in Western Kuin's dialect. It turned out that it was Western Kuin's special envoy. Seeing him come out, they stepped forward with Qi Gon at the front. "Eldest young sir, we heard that our seventh prince was sent into the palace by your Marquis Gu's manor. What exactly happened? Your honorable country's seventh prince secretly broke into our Marquis manor's outer study in an attempt to steal our military secrets. He should have been executed based on military laws, but given his status as a prince, we sent him to be dealt with by His Majesty." Qi Gon's complexion instantly turned pale. He never thought that Kuan Wushang, who had carefully crafted plans a few days prior, would be captured so quickly by the people of Marquis Gu's manor. He had even been caught in the act and sent into the palace. Things were really problematic now. "Eldest young sir, How could our dignified 7th Prince of Western Kuin do something like that? You must have misunderstood. How could you tie up our 7th Prince without an explanation? Qigong did not dare go into the palace and make a scene in front of Emperor Ning, but he would cause a commotion in front of Marquis Gu's manor. Gu Shubai said, "Whether or not it's a misunderstanding, you will find out by asking your 7th prince. Today is my father's birthday. Those who were not invited are not permitted to make a scene here. Special envoy, please quickly depart. Otherwise, do not blame me for not holding back. Our Majesty sent us to Eastern Ling with good intentions. Is this the way that Eastern Ling treats its guests? Our Eastern Ling is particular about diplomacy before violence. Could it be that Lord Qigong wishes to try out this heir's swordplay?" He was clearly smiling, but his eyes revealed a faint murderous intent. Qigong had no doubts. If he said another word, the sword hanging at Gu Shubai's hip would be plunged into his neck. He had no choice but to take a step back. Gritting his teeth, he very reluctantly left with his group. Sparse shadows over the shallow water. Part 3. The center of the garden was open and spacious. This place was originally a place that everyone in Marquis Gu's manor frequently visited. Regardless of the season, it would have many colorful flowers. Hundreds of flowers bloomed during spring, and lotuses began to appear during summer. Frost would cover the chrysanthemums during autumn, and snow fights to cover the fragrance of plums during winter. As for the present, it was a period where it was empty. The chrysanthemums had already withered, but the plums had not yet bloomed. As a result, the garden looked very depressing. Gu Jiogu stood beneath the barren plum branches while feeling lost. Suddenly, he noticed a girl in white clothes walk out from behind a nearby plum tree. She looked like she would be knocked over by a gust of wind. Sparse shadows over the shallow water, as a subtle fragrance floats about under the moon at dusk. She had recited a verse from Lin Bu's Little Plum Blossoms in a Mountain Garden in a deliberately normal tone that slightly resembled Yu Fu's voice. He could not stop himself from laughing. The girl was startled by his laughter and turned to look at him. Her face was quite nice and had a hint of a cold temperament. "What are you laughing at?" She did not ask who he was. She only asked what he was laughing at. It was evident that she knew who he was. Gu Jiogu slightly raised his eyebrow but could not remember who she was. "I am laughing because the plums have not yet blossomed, so there are no shadows. It's also the middle of the day, so there is no moon at dusk. Young miss, that poem you just recited truly does not fit the occasion." So that was the case. The girl in white slightly smiled and slowly walked toward him. "Just the word over is enough. I was unable to think of a better way to describe the plum branches." In Lin Bu's poem, the word over was describing the plum branch's unbridled nature. The plum branch looks unbridled and formless, but it has a unique character. Gu Jiogu smiled. It seems that young miss has a carefree disposition. The two were chatting warmly when a few girls suddenly walked into the garden. "Second young sir, what a coincidence. You're also here?" When the girls saw Gu Jiogu, their eyes immediately lit up as they quickly walked over to him. It was only after getting to his side that they noticed there was another girl already there. She was beautiful and thin, but her clothes were a little plain. "Who is this girl? Why have I never seen her before?" A young miss in colorful clothes impolitely began to size her up. To wear such plain clothes, she definitely was not the daughter of a prominent family. She was definitely not someone who could be placed in the spotlight, yet wanted to seduce Gu Jiogu. "We've never seen her before either." The young misses behind her also shook their heads and looked at the girl in white with bad intentions. No matter how one looked, he and Yu Fu did not look like siblings born from the same mother. Siblings born from the same parents would always have some similarities, no matter how different they looked. Kuan Wushang's sharp and handsome features were distinctive. Standing tall and mightily, He had the unruliness and might found in men from Western Kuan. Yu Fu's beauty was not like a firework that stood out among people. She was refined and elegant like someone from an elegant place. The two of them were not at all alike. It was just like how he and In Jiao shared no similarities. In Shuo lifted his brush and froze for a moment, only bringing it back down after a long pause. The words Beauty Zheng were also crossed out in black ink. Yu Fu had both of her hands stuck inside a pouch made of snow-white fox fur and had an extra purple cloak draped around her as she stood on a stool in the corridor. Even with the sky getting darker and darker, her eldest brother still had not come. "Young miss, it's getting windy outside. How about young miss goes inside to wait?" Yao Lan came outside to give her a different hand warmer. The coal inside the previous one was almost burned out, yet Yu Fu continued to hold on to it without realizing it. "I will wait a little longer. Who knows, eldest brother might come in a moment." He had told her to wait for his return. Standing in the hall, she would be able to see his return just a moment sooner. If she waited inside the room, she would just feel more anxious. It will start snowing soon. Did young miss not notice the sky getting darker and darker? Yao Lan pointed toward the sky where a number of gray clouds were bearing down. It looked rather dirty. Just as she said this, white snowflakes began to flutter down. Yu Fu leaped with joy. This is the year's first snow. The first snow of the year came on the head general's birthday. This is a good omen. She pulled her hands out of the pouch and brought them together, silently reciting a prayer. It was to pray for the head general's good health and that he would be able to return from every battle in triumph. "It's snowing. Is young miss still outside?" Lien Bai's voice came from inside the room. Fearing that she would come out to hurry her inside, she picked up her pouch and ran away. "Yao Lan, tell Lien Bai and the others that I will go out for a bit, then immediately come back." "Young miss, wait for me to go with you." Yao Lan wanted to follow her, but was worried that Lien Bai and the others would get worried if they could not find them. She hesitated for a moment, but still went back inside to tell Lien Bai. She then lifted the curtain and went back out, but where was there any sign of Yu Fu? A flurry of snow had quickly covered the entirety of Marquis Gu's manor, turning it into a sea of white. Yu Fu had gone out in a hurry and did not change into sheepskin boots to deal with the snow. Her feet were currently freezing, and she could only stomp her feet to try and regain some feeling in them. At this time, eldest brother would either be in the front hall or in the study. She thought for a moment, then headed in the direction of the front hall. There was a thin layer of snow on the cobblestone path. Yu Fu raised her foot and tested it, leaving a shallow imprint in the snow. The snow was not deep, but it was enough to completely cover her foot. If she went this way, her feet would definitely get extremely cold. She covered herself tightly with the cloak's hood, even hiding her small face under the hood. With her head down, she advanced. Snowflakes landed on her head and shoulders. The purple and white contrasting with one another looked particularly nice. These cloth shoes were indeed pretty, but it was just a little too thin. Both snow and water had seeped in. Gu Shubai reached out to remove the shoes. With a few moves, the wet shoes and socks had all been removed, and her feet had been stuffed into his cloak. "I'll bring you back first to get changed into a dry set of clothes." Picking her up horizontally, the tiny person fully fit under his large cloak and looked up at him foolishly. Meeting up with them were Lien Bai and the others. They had come out to look for them under their umbrellas. Upon seeing this sight, they could not help but freeze in their tracks. "Your young miss shoes and socks are in the back corridor." Gu Shubai gestured with his chin and hastily headed toward the western wing. It was likely because there were too many people at her side who treated her well, thus she still could not tell for certain who liked her like a little sister and who had special feelings for her. Aside from the way Gu Shubai liked her, she did not mind how other people liked her. "I'm not worried, and there's no need for you to worry. Those other men who got close to Yu Fu, he would sort them out one by one." Outside the window, the snow blew all over as the north wind roared. Yu Fu infatuatedly gazed at his profile. Suddenly realizing what he meant, Her eyes became crescents from her smile. The heavy snow continued for 2 days, and the entirety of Marquis Gu's manor was completely blanketed in a layer of snow. It was really pretty. A man with a cloak of silk and crane feathers walked slowly on the snow-covered ground. Behind him was a line of tidy footprints. His head was slightly lowered, as he seemed to be thinking about something. He did not even notice when a nearby pine tree shook. Behind the pine were 4 people squeezed together with snowballs in hand. When he gets here, throw them at him. Throw them at his face. Gu-yi directed everyone with the air of a general. 6th brother, this isn't good, right? There are 4 of us. For snowballs thrown at a single person's face would definitely make his face really cold. Especially, Yu-fu glanced at the snowball in Gu-yi's hands. It had been firmly packed and was even a little larger than her head. Would this really not cause a nosebleed? Gu Xiang was full of youthful vigor, and the snowball in his hands was also not small. Su Yunyin's could be considered the smallest, but it was also the size of her palm. Yu-fu thought for a moment and picked up a handful of snow from the ground. She would just do this and make do. Su Yunyin said with disdain, Yu-fu, that's much too little. It will scatter upon throwing it out. It's too lacking in spirit. Saying this, she hefted the snowball in her hand, then compared it to the ones that Gu Xiang and Gu-yi had. Feeling that it was a little lacking, she added a bit more snow. Yu-fu said, this isn't good, right? That's 4th brother. Gu Wenqing, among all of the brothers, was the one who treated his younger brothers and sisters the kindest. It's because it's 4th brother that we can do this. Would you dare to try this on 3rd brother? Gu Xiang drew his finger across his neck. He would definitely use his sword to cleave you in 2. We would not. Cleaving Yu-fu in half was a little unlikely, but he and Gu-yi would definitely be unable to escape. There are also eldest brother and 2nd brother. Would you dare do it to them? Yu-fu looked unconvinced. Gu-yi finished speaking and had already stepped out ahead of them. Whoosh dash, 2 large balls of snow flew at Gu Wenqing's face, and he quickly turned around. Smack dash, the 2 large snowballs that had been carefully packed were bitterly swatted to the ground. Swish dash, a smaller snowball flew at his face, but it fell to the ground halfway. Smack! Gu Wenqing was unscathed. Just as he was about to speak, Yu-fu hopped out from behind the tree and threw the handful of snow in his face. His face had suddenly come into contact with something cold and momentarily froze. Ha ha ha! The remaining 3 also came out from behind the tree, laughing so hard that they were almost curled up. The snowballs that they had spent a good amount of time packing had completely failed to reach Gu Wenqing, but who knew that Yu-fu's snow attack would succeed? Yu-fu embarrassedly said, 4th brother, I didn't do it on purpose. Who knew that he would dodge 3 mountains, but fall into a small gutter? Gu Wenqing turned his head and looked at the 3 who were curled up on the ground, who felt their hairs stand on end. You 2 little brats, do you want me to die? A snowball larger than his head. This truly was something that only the 2 of them could think of. Hee, 4th brother. We had faith in your martial arts and knew that you would be able to avoid it. Gu Xiang and Gu-yi hastily began trying to remedy the situation. 4th brother. What's wrong? Yu-fu felt that there seemed to be something on his mind. When he had walked over from the distance, she really would not have been able to tell that it was Gu Wenqing if not for his cloak. A son of the Gu family who usually kept his head held high now looked a little dispirited. With her saying it, everyone else began to take notice. 4th brother, what happened? Tell us, and we can help you come up with some ideas. Gu Wenqing awkwardly glanced at Gu-yi before looking at Su Yunyin. This matter really was not easy to say, but it also could not remain unsaid. You guys, quickly come up with some ideas. Ani and father said that they wanted to engage Su Yunyin to me. Aren't they just randomly playing at matchmaker? PFT. Su Yunyin looked like she really wanted to cough up blood. She really was not Madame Su's daughter. Gu-yi paused for a moment, and Gu Xiang prodded him with his elbow. Say something. To have engaged her to Gu Wenqing, Madame Su really must not know about Su Yunyin and Gu-yi. This matter should have Gu-yi personally make an appearance to say something. Gu Huaijiang had already said that he wanted to have them marry the girls that they liked. He would not necessarily accept Madame Su's proposal. Gui was a little dazed. He had never experienced such a situation before. Su Yunyin watched him and bit her lower lip. She bit so hard that it left a mark. Gu Wenqing and Yu Fu were also looking at him. Gui was being watched by everyone, which made him more nervous. What are you all looking at me for? How is this related to me? Su Yunyin's complexion instantly turned pale. What are you saying? Gu Xiang gritted his teeth while whispering to him. How is this not related to you? If Yunyin really gets married to fourth brother, will you not feel sad? Don't say it. Su Yunyin was on the verge of tears. Shooting a fierce look at Gui, she turned and ran off. Sister Su. Yu Fu quickly pushed Gui, sixth brother, quickly after her. The words questioning how it was related to him made even Yu Fu feel some heartache. Much less Su Yunyin. Gui stood in place and did not move but gloomily lowered his head. You bastard sickly sprout, it's unrelated to you. Even if I died, it would not matter to you. Su Yunyin ran in the snow. Staggering along, she finally dropped to her butt and began to wail. Is eldest brother inside? Yu Fu had gone to Gu Shubai's courtyard to look for him. The one to come out was a young man with a dignified appearance in a military uniform. He saw Yu Fu and froze, then stammered. He's inside. Very quickly, he cupped his hands and saluted her. He remained silent for a long time before saying, Greetings, young madam. The members of the Gu family army referred to Gu Shubai as the young general, then this young madam. Her face instantly turned red. Yinjun, don't spout nonsense. Gu Shubai strode out of his room and glanced at the man. She's young Miss Yu Fu. The girls of Eastern Ling paid the most attention to their reputations. He had not yet married Yu Fu, thus addressing her in this way was not good for her. Yinjun raised his head. Yes, greetings, young Miss Yu Fu. You are a great deal taller than before. Yu Fu loved it the most when others said that she had grown taller. Really? You've met me before? I have. When young Miss was treating the head general's poisoning, I was also at the camp and saw young Miss a few times from the distance. It's just that I was not allowed to enter the main tent, thus young Miss never saw me. Gu Shubai said, This is Yin Zheng. You should still remember General Yin Huaisher, right? Yin Zheng is his son. Ah, so you were the son of General Yan's family. General Yin is a very good person, and he took very good care of me while at the military camp. Yin Zheng smiled without reservation, as he should. Everyone is family. The Gu family's army was a family. Yu Fu looked up. Since we are all family, don't go calling me young miss. It's fine to call me by name. Yin Zheng, your name sounds quite good. Gu Shubai mindlessly glanced at her. Yin Zheng noticed a difference in the look in his eyes and instantly put on a serious expression. This officer does not dare. Young Miss must have come looking for the young general for something, right? This officer will be departing first. After saying this, he cupped his hands, turned, and left. Gu Shubai stepped forward, placed a hand on his shoulder, and spoke in a voice that Yu Fu could not hear. I know how you guys have been calling Yu Fu. If I hear anything like young madam again, don't blame me for not holding back. His voice sounded quite gentle, but it made people's hair stand on end. True dignity never relied on fierce fighting. This is something taught to the members of the Gu family. Yin Zheng subconsciously straightened his back upon hearing this and solemnly said, Yes. It seemed that the path from young miss to young madam was still quite long. For you to come running over in such a hurry, what happened? Gu Shubai turned around to look for Yu Fu, and only then did Yu Fu remember her original reason for coming over. Oh right, the head general wants to engage Sister Su to fourth brother. Did you know about this? I've heard about it. He nodded. What's wrong? With a bang, the door was pushed open, and Gui ran out through the door. Put on a cloak. The voice from inside the room was very calm. Immediately following this, a cloak flew straight at Gui. He caught it and ran off without having a chance to put it on. The three watched him run off in confusion and could only look at Gu Shubai in search of an answer. Inside the room, he sat next to the tea table, with a cup of fragrant tea in his hand. The corners of his lips were curled up in a slight smile, and he looked very natural. Father! Gui hastily ran to the main hall. Upon entering, he happened to see Gu Huaijiang chatting with Madame Su. Seeing him barge in while bringing the cold wind and a wet patch appearing beneath his feet, Gu Huaijiang could not stop himself from furrowing his brow. What do I usually teach you guys? Gui was the youngest, and when he was younger, had the worst health. Gu Huaijiang had always been the most lenient with him. Of course, this was only compared to Gu Shubai and the others. Compared to the ways in which the children of other families were raised, it was still more strict. Because of how he was raised, he was the most lively of the brothers, but he would not make mistakes with the more important rules. What could make him so frantic today? Madame Su was also quite shocked, forgetting what she was just about to say. Father, I've made a mistake. I will come back later. Forget it. Forget it. He must have something urgent to have come in such a rush. Just listen to what he has to say. Madame Su had spoken, thus Gu Huaijiang would naturally give her face. Gui turned back around. Seeing that Madame Su was also present, he suddenly felt a little too embarrassed to speak. Quickly come and warm yourself by the brazier. Look at how much snow is on you. Even your shoes are soaked. Madame Su directed for a brazier to be placed near him. Sure enough, placing both feet on it made him feel much warmer, and Gui began to think. Eldest sister, there's no need to worry too much about him. His health was not too good when he was younger. Taking care of him now will spoil him. Now, his condition is much better and is even a bit better than Guxiang and the others. There's no need to worry about him. Madame Su smiled warmly. The two of them were not in any rush, thus they sipped tea while waiting for Gui to speak. After a long time, Gui quietly said, Father, I heard that you want to match Yunyan with fourth brother. Is this true? What did you say? Gu Huaijiang had not heard clearly. Gui's face immediately started to turn red. He had finally managed to summon the courage to ask, so how could Gu Huaijiang not have heard? I was saying, a man without the slightest bit of metal. Even a young girl like you Fu isn't as twitchy as you are. What exactly is the matter? Some things could be tolerated, and others could not be tolerated. Being compared to a little girl, Gui was naturally displeased. With a rush of courage, he blurted, Father, I want to marry the tomboy. When he beat around the bush, he really beat around the bush. When he was direct, he was really direct. Madame Su nearly spat out a mouthful of tea. Forcefully suppressing a smile, she used a handkerchief to wipe the corners of her mouth. There was not much of a reaction from Gu Huaijiang. Looking carefully, he was faintly smiling. Based on the way the two looked, why did it seem like they knew a long time ago? Gui was young and did not understand this sort of sequence of events. You came too late. Father has already engaged Yunyan to your fourth brother. In the future, she will be your fourth sister-in-law. Pay attention to how you address her. Fourth sister-in-law? Gui was so angry that his face was bright red. But father, she doesn't like fourth brother, and fourth brother doesn't like her. Didn't you say that you would let us marry the girls that we like? Why are you breaking your promise? Yunyan is different from other girls. Father and your aunt have already discussed it and needed to choose one for her. Right now, it's your aunt who has taken an interest in your fourth brother, and father feels that this is quite good. Gui looked at Madame Su and suddenly understood the most important part. This was to say that as long as Madame Su thought highly of him, Su Yunyan could be engaged to him. Was that not right? Auntie, do you no longer love me? Where am I lacking compared to fourth brother? He partially squatted down next to Madame Su and acted spoiled, making use of all the tricks he knew. Auntie, when I was little, didn't you say that you loved me the most? Why is it that when you have something nice, you didn't think of me and only thought of fourth brother? How is marrying Yunyan a good thing for you? Auntie recalls that you two were on bad terms, thus I never considered you. Madame Su replied with a question, which made Gui's face turn even redder. That's not being on bad terms. That's just two childhood sweethearts enjoying their childhood together. When others have bullied me for no reason, I have never bothered to fight back. Ever since childhood, I have only ever bullied her alone. So it was like that. Madame Su covered her mouth with a handkerchief and quietly laughed, while Gu Huaijiang slightly shook his head at her. Do not let this brat off so easily, lest he not know how to cherish her in the future. So you liked Yunyan and didn't hate Yunyan? How can this be good? Looking at Yunyan, she doesn't. Says who? She likes me. She only likes me. If you don't believe it, just wait for a little. I will go and bring her to have her tell Auntie. Auntie, just wait for me. Saying this, he rapidly stood up to rush out when a person suddenly leaped out from behind a screen. Hey, where are you running off to look for me? It was Su Yunyan. Gui's eyes widened and looked at Gu Huaijiang and Madame Su in disbelief. The two elders enigmatically exchanged a look, no longer able to hold back their smiles. Very well. He had been plotted against by the two old-timers. Su Yunyan's face was very red. As she slowly walked over, weren't you going to look for me? I'm right here. What are you looking for me for? The two stood facing one another, blushing furiously. They smiled foolishly for a long time, yet did not say anything of value. Gu Huaijiang coughed dryly. His foolish son really made him worried. Aside from how biased Gu Huaijiang was, Gui said even more that he did not want to call her eldest sister-in-law. You are our little sister. So it was like that. Yu Fu came to a sudden realization. So sixth brother just thought for a moment and knew that his unhappiness toward our engagement was not the same as his unhappiness toward Sister Su's engagement to fourth brother. It was not that he did not want to call Su Yunyan fourth sister-in-law. He just did not want her to marry someone other than him. Eldest brother is really amazing, being able to convince him with just a few words. Just look at how clingy he is with Sister Su. It's not that I am amazing. Gu Shubai maintained his usual modesty, saying with a faint smile, it's that he's too stupid. Idiots have their own blessings, as Gui gritted his teeth and went to look for Gu Huaijiang. Gu Huaijiang also agreed to let him accompany them on the trip to Jinling. You are already 16 years of age. It's time for you to go out and put your skills to the test. Your eldest brother was already able to take responsibility for his actions by your age. I will let you go to Jinling this time to get acquainted with things. The last 5 words were said in a quiet voice, but Gui was rejoicing and did not hear them clearly. Father, go to Jinling and what? It's nothing. You need to listen to your eldest brother. Don't cause him any trouble. How could I possibly cause eldest brother any trouble? With me there, he can bring 5 fewer soldiers, no 10. Security inside Eastern Ling's borders had always been quite good. With Marquis Gu's manor soldiers personally forming the escort, there would likely not be any who would dare to do anything. Better safe than sorry. On this side, Gu Huaijiang had allowed Gu Yi to go out. On the other, he advised Gu Shubai to bring more soldiers. Bring an additional 10 soldiers, no, 20. Gu Shubai was not worried about Gu Yi. Though he was young, his martial skill was far greater than other youths his age. The one that worried him more was Yu Fu. The special envoy from Western Kuan had not yet left, and that dislikable big junior disciple was still here. Recently, he had not been shameless enough to scale the walls of Marquis Gu's manor, and the people in court knew about him stealing military secrets. The eldest prince and the second prince had also distanced themselves from him by a great deal. A prince from an enemy state who had stolen military secrets, they were already giving Western Kuan face by not killing him, yet he wanted to be treated well? Dream on. The night before they were to set out, he went to Gu Jugga's courtyard. Eldest brother never comes without a reason. What is the purpose behind this visit? Ever since Gu Huaijiang announced Gu Shubai's engagement to Yu Fu at his birthday banquet, Gu Jugga's attitude toward him had become a great deal more distant. He also spent his days feeling dejected. He was no longer as cheerful as before. I will be escorting Ani and Yunyan back to Jinling tomorrow, and I will be bringing sixth brother with me. With me not here, things at home will be left to you. Gu Shubai did not care about how he felt and just entered the room. Eldest brother, don't worry. This isn't your first time going out. In the past, I took care of things quite well. Nothing will happen. Gu Jiogu followed him in and sat down. The brothers sat down across from each other on the sofa, and it fell silent for a moment. Gu Shubai shook his head. This time is different. I know that you have always taken good care of things at home. The one I wish to entrust to you this time is Yu Fu. Yu Fu is also my little sister. Of course, I will take good care of her. Gu Jiogu really was understanding, unlike Gu Yi, who was made his displeasure very clear upon hearing this news and said that Gu Huaijiang was looking down on him too much. Could it be that something really will happen? Gu Shubai said, Father said that there are people from Western Kuan in the country, and there are people in court with their eyes on Marquis Gu's manor. It would be best to be cautious. It might not be that something will happen. There's no need for you to worry. How could he not worry? They all understood that based on the keen senses that Gu Huaijiang had cultivated through his many decades on the battlefield, his judgment was very rarely incorrect. No, 40 is too few. They're all ladies. When the time comes, how will you be able to protect them all? Gu Jiogu had already cast the matter with Yu Fu to the back of his mind, as he did his best to convince Gu Shubai to bring some more soldiers on his escort. Gu Huaijiang said 40, so it was 40. Before setting out, everyone exited the manor to send them off, as Gui shifted from side to side atop his horse. It was not a result of having never ridden a horse. Instead, it was because he had never gone on such a long trip before. Thus he was filled with excitement. Despite their age, this was the first time that Gu Xiang would be apart from Gu Yi, and he was not too used to it. You need to be careful along the way. Don't go causing eldest brother any trouble. Also, once you get to Jinling, don't have so much fun that you forget about home. We will be waiting for you to celebrate the new year. On this trip to Jinling, 10 days would be enough for a round trip. Doing some calculations, they would definitely be able to return in time for the new year. 6 brother, these are some pastries that were prepared for you. There aren't any crab cakes because those will crumble with the slightest movement, so there are only some items that won't break so easily. At any rate, it will taste better than dried rations. Yu Fu lifted a cloth bundle and hung it on his saddle. Eldest brother, if you get hungry, just eat the pastry. There are the sweet green rice balls that you like the most. Gu Yi, then why don't you hang it from eldest brother's saddle? Yu Fu said earnestly, hanging it from eldest brother's saddle doesn't look good. Gu Yi, so it was fine if he did not look good, and it was of utmost importance that eldest brother looked good, right? Gu Shubai nodded to her. It's no longer early. I fear that it will snow soon. Father, we will be setting off first. Su Yinyan poked her head out through the carriage's window. Yu Fu, next time, you come play in Jinling. I will bring you to see Yuwatai, and the city moat has many beautiful gems. It's also fine if you can't come. I will quickly be returning to the capital. All right, Sister Su, until next time. Wearing small red gloves, she waved to her. Watching the procession depart, snowflakes began to fall, and their lines of sight became blurry. Sure enough, Gu Shubai was right, as it had begun snowing so soon. Their journey would definitely be very difficult. Let's all go back inside. Jiogu, your eldest brother is no longer here, so the matters in the manor will be left to you to handle. Eldest brother has advised me of this earlier. Father, please feel at ease to handle military matters. Son will take care of matters in the manor. There was still more than half a month remaining until the new year, and it was almost time for the school to let out for winter break. Gui had asked for leave and left. On this day, Yu Fu went to the school with Gu Wenqing and Gu Xiang to attend the final class of the year. Lin Femiao stepped into the classroom and looked around in good spirits. Not seeing Gui was truly a gratifying thing. Once today's class ends, winter break will begin. Gu Wenqing was the first to stop writing. He had drafted things up while writing and did it very smoothly. Blowing lightly on the ink, then writing his name below the couplet in small font, he then handed it to Lin Femiao. Silvery white snow heralds the end of the year. Gentle winds and light rains are omens of a good year. Good, very good. Your work has always been like this, gentle and refined. Your handwriting is also neat and elegant. Let's hang it up in the corridor to the backyard. Everyone looked up. It was written so well, So why was it being hung up in the backyard where it would not be seen? Lin Fengmiao slowly looked around, and everyone suddenly realized. He wanted to stick the ugliest one in the place where it would be seen the most. When it comes to ginger, older really is spicier. This trick really was vicious. Tian. Title is an idiom meaning that older people can be harder to deal with because of their experience with many things. The cold winds howled outside, yet, inside the classroom, some people were sweating up a storm. The older students were fine, but the younger students were looking all around. In the end, they bit the bullet and went to look for Zhou Xidao. Teacher Zhou, I messed up my papers. Can you give me another two? Zhou Xidao looked behind him. Behind this young student, there were many pairs of eyes filled with hope. He was almost unable to stop himself from smiling. I cannot change the rules set by Teacher Lin. After saying this, he pointed in Lin Fengmiao's direction with his chin. Gu Changming ran back in fear. How could he dare to try and negotiate with Teacher Lin? It was unavoidable. Of the ones that he had messed up, he could only choose the two that he thought looked best. In his seat, he lifted all four, but they all looked roughly the same. He was deciding which dwarf to promote, but it was still just a dwarf. If he handed this couplet in, Teacher Lin might just leave the spot at Guangsha Studies entrance to him. He would lose a great deal of face. At this moment, Yufu had also begun writing. Her couplet had been written on some scrap paper and carefully refined before being copied over. It was even neater than Gu Wenqing's. Looking forward to the flowers and trees of spring, enjoying a good year of laughter and wine. Good. This couplet is so good that it should be hung up on the entrance to the firewood shed. Unfortunately, this old man is reluctant to have it in the company of soot. How about we have it in the backyard on this old man's door?
Yes.
Gu Wenqing picked up the couplet and was about to go and stick it up when he saw that Yufu had finished. Thus he waited to go with her. She turned her head and saw that Gu Xiang was also about to finish. Fourth brother, let's wait for a little and go with fifth brother. Gu Xiang happened to put his brush down at this moment and carefully blew on the paper, only bringing it over to Teacher Lin when the ink had completely dried. His writing was naturally not as nice as Gu Wenqing and Yufu's. If the ink ran because it had not dried, it would look even worse. Yufu stood next to Gu Wenqing and suddenly began walking toward the students' area. I still have two blank ones here. I'll give them to you? Gu Changming was in the middle of a difficult decision when he suddenly saw a pair of small white hands holding two strips of red paper. It was like a miracle sent by the heavens. Looking up, the messenger of the heavens was Yufu. I already turned mine in and have no use for these two. Yufu was worried that he would not accept them out of shame. Thus she specifically added an explanation. Gu Changming's face was bright red, and his head was lowered. Thank you. Gu Wenqing also brought over his two remaining pieces of paper. I also have two strips here. Hold back a little when using them. You can also learn from Yufu and write your couplet on some scrap paper first before copying it over. Gu Changming looked over at Yufu's seat. Sure enough, there was some scrap paper with a couplet written on it. It also showed signs of some corrections. I'm not as amazing as you two, and only felt a little more satisfied after my second attempt. Gu Xiang walked over with his couplet in hand and shrugged, expressing his powerlessness. Together, the three exited the classroom and headed toward the backyard. Gu Changming looked at Yufu's parting figure in a daze. Ever since she had gone over to the older students' class, he had not seen her much. In his mind, she was still the girl whose hair he had accidentally bumped loose. Looking at her now, she had grown taller and become a little more mature. She looked like a small deity. Yufu, have you forgotten? That Gu Changming bullied you before while you were still in Teacher Zhou's class. Gu Wenqing held their couplets, and Gu Xiang held the glue. While they walked, he asked Yufu, I remember, and you guys even gave him a beating, yet you still gave him your paper? He is a member of the extended Gu family. If we really let him have his mess hung up at the front door, how bad would the loss of face be for all of us? As Yufu said this, she looked back. There was nobody there, as the other students still had not come out. She lowered her voice. The main reason is that I accidentally glanced over at his desk, and the writing was so ugly that it was offensive. I could not bear to look at that. Gu Xiang burst out laughing. Let's paste ours in the corridor first, then go and paste Yu Fu's on Teacher Lin's door. Gu Wenqing placed all of the couplets on a bench in the corridor, then picked out his and Gu Xiang's. One was stuck at the entrance to the corridor, and the other was stuck at the other end. With Yu Fu's being pasted up, the entirety of Guangsha Study's backyard had been claimed by Marquis Gu's manor. The three of them exited the backyard and saw the other students come out. They were all carrying ladders and glue. Some looked bitter, and some looked pleased. Let's go and take a look at the entrance. Based on Lin Fengmiao's arrangements, the one plastered outside Guangsha Study's front entrance would definitely be the one that he thought was the worst. Sure enough, there was a large crowd gathered around the front entrance. There were some who had already put theirs up but had not yet washed their hands of the glue, and some who had not yet put theirs up and were still carrying their couplets. At the entrance, there stood a wooden ladder, and a chubby youth was shakily climbing down. He was quite frightened. Of spring, summer, autumn, and winter, spring is the best. Of plums, peaches, pears, and apricots, plums come in first. One person burst out laughing. Golly, is this a couplet, or are you playing mahjong? The youth on the ladder had finally climbed down, and it was Gu Changming's older brother, Gu Changsheng. He ferociously turned his head and argued, "What nonsense about mahjong? This is a very good New Year's couplet. It's not just very good, it's truly the best. Otherwise, how could it be plastered outside our study's main entrance?" Yu Fu could not stop herself from laughing. In the crowd, Gu Changming secretly looked at her. Being affected by her sweet laughter, he also began to laugh. If she revealed her embroidery to others, it would provide others with a clue on her true background. She put down the embroidery hoop. "Second brother still wishes to know about my identity. Is that right?" Gu Jioga froze. Lian Bai entered the room with a cup of tea. After placing it in front of him, she placed a brazier near his feet. "Second young sir just returned from handling something outside the manor. You must have come to see the young miss before even getting a chance to change clothes, right? Look, even your shoes are wet. It would be best to let them warm up with the brazier." Yu Fu lowered her head to take a look. Sure enough, there was a patch that was darker than the rest. The end of the year was the time for the various manors in the capital to visit one another. Gu Shubai was not present, thus the matters in the manor were handed over to Gu Jiaoge. He had recently been exceptionally busy, yet he had still especially come to see her, thus she truly should not have any complaints about him. "Second brother, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to come and see me." Compared to what she had said earlier, this was far gentler. Gu Jiaoge said, "It was my fault. There are some things that even father and eldest brother will not ask, yet I still wanted to find out too." He could not say that it was to understand her better and get her to like him more, right? To protect you better and to keep people like Kuan Wu Shang from gathering around you. Yu Fu laughed and said, "Second brother, don't worry. Even Yao Lan can't be bothered to deal with him, so how could he get close to me? If not for it being the end of the year, His Majesty might have already sent them packing back to Western Kuan, right? The special envoy from Western Kuan is way too shameless." Kuan Wu Shang attempted to steal military secrets, and though he did not succeed, it's something that everyone in court knows. In spite of this, they still have the face to stay in Eastern Ling. Eastern Ling is a country that emphasizes courtesy, thus it's no good to send guests packing at the end of the year. After saying this, he glanced at Yu Fu, but she did not look particularly embarrassed. Them not leaving makes it clear that they have some other goal. What other goal? Gu Jiaogu had unconsciously blurted this out and immediately regretted it. Yu Fu spent her days in the manor and did not visit the court. How could she possibly know what Western Kuan's goals might be? Subconsciously, he felt that Yu Fu was smart and sensitive, able to notice things that others could not. He found her judgment to be reliable. "I don't know either. Based on my understanding of Kuan Wu Shang, since he said that Master told him to take care of me, and he already saw that I am living very well in Marquis Gu's manor,